Well, welcome everybody to our expert exchange for February. This one, we're going to be talking about the huge opportunity that's being created for customer marketing because of how much tech buyers are now starting to shift from using search to using AI when they're in a buying process. And my name is Jeff Ernst. I am the founder and CEO of Slap5. I'm also the founder and operator of Voice Advice, which does case study customer interviews and writing. And I'm thrilled to be sharing this topic with you today. And just let me tell you, before we actually jump in, I'm using a lot of the same slides that I've been using lately when I've been doing workshops with CEOs, CMOs, and chief sales officers about this topic of how tech buyers are using AI. So I purposefully didn't change too much of the slides for you because I want you to see what I'm telling your executives, because they're reacting to this quite well and taking it quite seriously. And so that's why you may find a few things in here that sound a little obvious to you, but that's okay. And so before we actually jump in, though, let me just start. If we could go into the chat here, tell me which of these applies to you. I'd like to get a sense of how conscious you are of the fact that AI is changing how tech buyers buy, and whether you've thought about it yet. And there's no shame in saying that you haven't, because this is a brand new topic, and I think I'm one of the first people in the world that's actually done research into this area, along with two others who happen to be on the call with me today. So what do people think? Okay, Kim. Oh, all right. Yeah, Howard, of course. The buyers are 2. Other than that, most people are 1s. Evan, already investigating. Good for you. BT, you're aware of it. Oh, all right. So people are actually into this. I'm telling you, when I take the same poll with the executives, I can tell you that it's almost always 1s. They're almost all 1s. And so this is great. I'm thrilled that people are already thinking about this, that this is a good sign. So you're going to believe that it's real and that I'm not just making it up, that tech buyers are using AI. All right. So here's what we're going to I just wanted to first let you know, what is causing or informing my point of view on this topic. And again, it's a point of view because I'm going to be presenting some facts. I'm going to be presenting some what it means, and then I'm going to be presenting some predictions. But this point of view comes from a lot of different things. One is just having been 30 years in the tech industry as a marketer and product management executive, but then also at Forrester, having done about 120 customer satisfaction interviews, as well as annual technology buyer surveys, where we dig really deep into who they trust, how they buy. And then on top of that, with Buyer Persona Institute, I've done over 1,000 technology buyer interviews, digging deep into how they buy, why, what keeps them from buying, what their process is, things like that. And then also as founder of Voice Advice, I've done a ton of customer interviews for purposes of creating case studies, but also as part of that research, I'm always asking people how the buyers in particular and customers, how it is that they're using AI. So I've got a lot of fresh data on that. So what are we going to cover? We're going to talk about why should we care about this topic in the first place. With this, we'll go through quickly, seeing so many of you already do have it on your mind, judging from the poll. We're going to talk about when, why, and how buyers tell me that they're using AI across their entire problem-solving cycle. And then really the meat of it is going to be talking about what do we need to do to adapt to this, and why is it such a good opportunity for customer marketing. Of course, for you guys, I'm going to be talking about why it's such a great opportunity. When I'm presenting this to CEOs, CMOs, and chief sales officers, I'm talking about how they need to adapt their go-to-market strategies to take into account this new reality. Okay, so let me just continue on here. And so I'm first going to talk about why I care so much about how buyers use AI. Because if you go back to November 2022, ChatGPT launched, and that changed everything. And if you just look at the changes and updates to ChatGPT in the last year and 2 months, it's been moving at an incredible pace, faster than any other technology innovation, and it's just going to continue to move at a quick. And so new versions of the language models have been launched, new ways of new media types, integrating into different platforms, different country penetration, all types of things like that. And so for me personally, when it was launched in November of 2022, I noticed that most of the sales and marketing gurus and practitioners and AI aficionados out there in the sales and marketing world, they all went immediately down the path of content generation, because that's what ChatGPT really shines at, right? Is it's generating content. So as you guys know, sales teams really latched onto it to generate prospecting emails. Marketing teams were generating their own nurture email content, website content. A lot of people were creating bots to generate all kinds of things to help you with your sales and marketing. But me, always being the contrarian, I decided with my buyer research background to say, no, I'm going to kind of go the road less traveled here and take the buyer behavior path. And I really started it a year ago investigating why is it and how is it that buyers are using this, so I could bring a whole new novel set of insights to our profession. So again, I mentioned all the buyer interviews that I've done, and historically, this is the types of things. This is just sort of like the top couple of things that buyers usually have on their minds as they go through these different stages of the buying cycle. And if you start with the first stage, I'm calling it, ouch, I'm in pain, right? That's when a buyer first realizes there's something going on that they may need to address. They're not shopping yet, but the problem is being realized. And so at this point, they're trying to ask themselves, like, should we tackle this problem now? Is our organization ready to tackle this? Is it possible for me to get buy-in from everybody that's going to be needed to tackle this problem? And what are the general approaches out there for solving it? Are people hiring staff to solve it? Are they working with consultants? Are they buying technology? Are they just doing research? And then you get into the second phase, which, how do I solve it? So this is when people are looking for what more detail on what those approaches are. So they want to know who's had a similar problem or goal. What have companies like ours been doing about this challenge? What outcomes have others achieved by addressing it, so we can decide whether it's worth it, and what approaches could work for us. Okay, then the actual buying process starts in step 3. This is when they're saying which vendors have a viable solution for us. How well does each vendor meet our needs or our criteria? What have their customers experienced? And then this is also where you get those yeah buts, right? This is where the objections come up. Your solution is too slow. Your solution is too expensive, things like that. And then they become a customer. Now this is when they're all concerned with, okay, let's do it. What obstacles are we going to encounter? How do we get people to use it? Adoption is always a concern. What are the keys to success and best practices that others had? So I'm showing you this because I'm going to come back and show to you how it compares to what people are asking in AI in just a minute. But just a little bit more on why we should care. Because of all of these insights that I've captured around buyer behavior, overwhelmingly, what I've learned is that what buyers want, if you look at all the questions they have and all the information they want, 85% of those needs that they have are best serviced, best answered in the customer voice. They're things they want to know about being a customer. It's all about wanting that crystal ball. They want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly, even the challenges that they're going to run into, because nothing ever goes totally smoothly. And only 15% of what they want is best answered in the company voice. That's your features, functions, and that's your pricing and terms and MSA and things like that. But the mismatch here is that with what we produce as marketing departments, 98% of it is in the company voice. Only 2% of what we deliver is actually in the customer voice. And again, I really stress this with the C-level executives to show that where they're spending their money and the content that they're creating is just totally out of whack with the buyer behavior research. And so just a little bit more on ChatGPT for justification for why we should care. Well, if you look at this amazes me. The fastest time to 100 million users, if you go back to Facebook, that took 4.5 years. Look at TikTok, it took 9 months. ChatGPT, it took 2 months to get to 100 million users. That should astound us. It astounds me. I still can't believe it. And then if you just look at the volume last year of uh, unique site visits, where it got up to 1.8 billion by December of monthly visits. So this is being used, and so there's no doubt that our buyers are using it. Okay. I know usually at this point when I'm talking about this, and people know that I'm going to be talking about how you need to be in the conversation and you need to have your content in these language models. People usually tell me, yeah, but the ChatGPT is only informed up to September of 2021. That's when it's trained through. And that was absolutely true for GPT 3.5. Which came out in November of 2022. GPT-4, also very stale data, almost a year and a half. GPT-4 Turbo, when that came out in November of 2023, that was trained through April of 2023. And so the gaps in time lapses are getting shorter and shorter. And my first prediction here is that these large language models and the AI bots are going to become close to real time. And there are some out there that are already real time, some of the more proprietary language models. But I like to point that out because this is another reason why we need to care about this. And so what does this mean? This means that people now would prefer to ask rather than search. So people would rather ask a question and get an answer like they're talking to a human being than they would then just search on a keyword and get a whole list of search results that they now have to parse through and hopefully find something useful. Now, is it a chicken and the egg? I mean, is it because they can ask that their behavior is shifting? Who knows? The fact is that there's now a huge preference where they would rather ask than search. And so what does this mean? This means Google, Bing, Facebook, Amazon, all the big platform players are going to now, they're shifting to now answering questions rather than just finding the right links to content to serve up to people when those people are there trying to solve a problem. So that leads me to the next bold prediction, where I'm 100% confident in this, is that the more brand mentions that you have out there in the ether that are relevant to what people are asking these chatbots and AI bots, the more those AI bots will include your brand and your products in those conversations that they're having with users. Okay, let that sink in. The more brand mentions that you have that are relevant, and I should have bolded the word relevant. Relevancy is the key here, but that's nothing new for us marketers, nothing new for SEO either. But it has to be entirely relevant to what people are asking. Then the more that you're going to be included in the conversation, which is the ultimate goal here, right? We want to be included in the conversation as eyeballs shift and behaviors shift. Okay, so if anybody does want to stop me for a question, just put the question into the chat, or feel free. We're a small enough group here. We can come off mute. You can come off mute if you want to ask your question. But let me just go on and ask people here now. Has anybody actually used AI themselves or used ChatGPT themselves when they've been in problem-solving mode or buying mode to just try to accelerate their learning or get something more useful than they might have gotten from just doing a regular search? Has anybody tried that? Anybody have an example? Maybe do a hand raise in the chat if you have one. No. Sabar, any color you want to add to you are researching a product and its features? So that means you have done it, I'm sure. Maybe if those that have, if there's a question, if you can remember sort of the question you asked, or not word for word, but just sort of the gist of what you asked.
Sure. Hi, Jeff. So as far as I remember, I was basically confused between two different products, and I asked it to lay out me in a simple language between the product specifications and exact differences between the two monitors. So the basic idea was to either get a curved monitor or a flat monitor versus an LED and LCD, and there are a lot of monitors in the market for right now, right? So I just picked on that which are the key things that I should keep in mind initially in shortlisting and monitor, and then I asked it to suggest me some, and then I asked it to compare the two for me.
Yes, great use case for AI. And just Sabar, before you go up, did you get useful information back?
I would say yes, it actually somewhat influenced, not exactly on the product level, but what would be the key features I should be looking out when I'm going ahead and buying any particular monitor.
Okay,
Because as we said, that products are not yet updated, so I have to search products by myself, but I was looking for those key features that actually was suggested to me through an AI, that these are the things that you should look after whenever you are buying a monitor, which if it is a high-end monitor.
right. That's a great example. I see Heather's used it for gift ideas. That's a
Yeah.
very common one. If you're good at prompting, you can get a lot of great ideas doing it that way. Um, all right, and I know I used it personally. Not too long ago, I was buying a gimbal. Where's my gimbal? I think it's right down there. But it's one of those stabilizers for shooting videos that we do. We shoot. We go to our customers' own customer conferences and do what we call a minute booth and shoot the feet on the street of people attending the conference. And but I was entirely new to these gadgets called the gimbal, and so I really used it to educate myself on what should I be looking for in a gimbal, and it totally opened my eyes. And so, I'm going to get into a little bit more, but before we do that, um, let me just talk a little bit about how the types of questions that buyers are asking AI. And my disclaimer here is that I've what do you call it? I've kind of aggregated these questions and abstracted them a little bit, shortened them so that you can see, so to be easier to explain and easier to comprehend quickly. But usually they're expressed in much longer forms than what you see here. But this is really the gist of the questions that are most commonly asked at each stage. And so in this initial stage, remember this initial stage was when people are first discovering they have a pain. And so they're asking specifically on ChatGPT and others, do other companies have the problem of such and such? So they describe their problem and they're trying to find out, what other companies have this problem. They want to know that they're not alone, and they want to see some examples of other companies that have had it and tried to solve it. They're trying to also figure out, is it worth doing it? And so they're asking, how can companies benefit from doing X, solving that problem? Maybe it's replacing my ERP system. Maybe it's implementing a CRM system, things like that. And then a lot of times, this is one of the most frequent ones, is how have other companies built the business case for tackling such a problem? So they're looking for help building their business case. And it's hard to get really good search results if you just search on that, because you're going to get very jaded points, but you get a lot of great response in conversational format when you ask questions like this. Okay, then when we move on to the second stage, this is now where they know they have the problem. Now they're trying to figure out, we're going to now start to solve it. They want to know, how have other companies solved the problem of X? And they want to know specifics. Give me examples of companies and how they went about solving it. And sometimes they're even asking at this point, what was their solution? Did they buy a technology? Did they hire somebody? How did they go about doing it? Oftentimes they're asking at this point, what must be in place before a company can tackle such and such? Because sometimes companies aren't ready, and so they're trying to assess whether their company is ready to tackle a problem. So they're asking, what has to be in place? And then they're also asking, what outcomes have others achieved by doing X, Y, Z? They want to know that it's worth it, and that if the outcomes that others have gotten align with the outcomes that they're hoping to achieve. Or sometimes they might even modify this one. And again, these are just the starters points of the conversation, but they're going to go back and keep chatting with it. And so sometimes they might put their outcome. Have others achieved the outcome of X? Reducing my sales cycles by more than 50% or something like that. So they're really interested in outcomes. Then we get into the actual buying process, and they're asking questions like this: what vendors have the most success solving the problem of X, Y, Z? And they're looking for vendor names to come back and in examples of that success being solved. What is it like implementing a blank solution? Or they might say, if they've got a short list, they might say, what is it like implementing vendor A's solution? So they're looking for the experiences of other customers that to be found and served back to them by AI. And then this one, no surprise here, I hope, to all the customer marketers. What are the biggest pitfalls companies encounter when adopting an XYZ solution? So as many of you have probably heard me say many times, every buyer knows that things are not going to be perfect. They know things are going to go wrong. They just want to know ahead of time what those possible derailments are so that they can be prepared for them and react accordingly. And then when they're in a buying process, or let's say when they are live and using a solution, they might be dissatisfied with it. And so oftentimes they're out there saying, what are the best alternatives to my current provider and why? And because maybe some news came out or something is happening where that their current solution is no longer viable or it's just no longer working for them. Or if they are going forward with their current solution, they say, how do companies get the most out of XYZ's vendor's solution? And then how have other companies overcome such and such an obstacle to adopting a particular solution? So hopefully you'll see that those are not drastically different than what my buyer research showed at the very beginning. They're just different flavors of the same knowledge gaps that buyers have as they're going through this process. And that's not surprising that they're not that different, because if you think about it, it's a buying need. They're just going to a different place now to get the same questions and fears and doubts addressed. And they're trusting and relying on AI because AI, if you look at it, it's been designed to try to provide the same type of answer that a human would when asked the same question. That's its ultimate goal. So that's why they're asking these types of questions. And I can tell you in the research that I've done that they're very satisfied with the information that they've been getting from AI. Now there's a lot of hit or miss, and a lot of it comes down to how well you prompt engineer. So prompt engineering is a big thing, but once you learn the tips and tricks of prompt engineering and you're asking the right questions, you can get very, very useful answers. Okay. So if there aren't any other questions here, nobody's raising their hand, let me just jump in. So that was what and how and why buyers are using things like ChatGPT. But what does it mean for sales and marketing? Well, we must adapt. And again, this one was originally created for CEOs, CMOs, and chief sales officers. But the big transition here is that we need to shift from competing on keywords so that we can be at the top of the SERPs, search engine result pages, to now competing on topics so that we can be part of the conversation around that topic. Let that sink in for a minute, okay? We're going to shift from competing on keywords so that we can be at the top of the search engine result pages to now competing on topics so that we can be part of the conversation that buyers are having with AI bots. Okay, so that's a given, right? And so if anybody wants to argue with that, feel free. But I think that's a given. But here's my prediction as a result of this adaptation that we need to make. My prediction that search engine optimization, maybe it won't be replaced, but the importance of search engine optimization is going to decline, while the importance of language model optimization is going to increase. And by the way, I made up that term, language model optimization. That's not a term that's used out there, but I predict there will be a term similar to that, which is going to be all about how you get your content into the language models so that they're trained, and then including your content and citing you as part of the whole conversation that's going on. Well, Kim, do you want it to be death to SEO? Or is that your prediction? Interesting point. But again, I have too many buddies in the SEO business that I don't want to say myself that, but I do predict the emergence of language model optimization. And I actually put a post on LinkedIn this morning saying that customer marketers are going to master language model optimization. You're going to have to. You're going to have to master it. And it's such a great opportunity. This is the huge opportunity if you learn how to do this. So let's jump into now what it means to do that, okay? And this is what happens if you don't do it. I don't know exactly what this is, but to me it looks very painful. uh, must be Game of Thrones, right? Any GOT fans out there? So anyway, what are the recommendations? And again, the slides again were made for CEOs, CMOs, and chief sales officers, but I'm gonna adapt the details of the context around these for you guys, and I think they still apply. So, okay, BT, what's LLM? LLM is a large language model, okay? I apologize for anybody that doesn't know what LLMs are. So large language model, so ChatGPT is built on a large language model produced by and trained by OpenAI, which is very much invested, has huge investment from Microsoft. So they work very closely with Microsoft and Bing. And so a large language model has been trained on all the content and data out there on the internet through all these training algorithms. This is the secret sauce that goes way above my pay grade. But they learn a lot, and then a lot of times these large language models then get customized. So there's big ones that are like learning everything, and then there's purpose-built ones that are being trained on specific things to build specific bodies of knowledge. And so you're going to have to start to get to know what are the big large language models like the one that ChatGPT runs over and that Bing runs on top of. But then there's also going to be industry-specific language models, I predict, that you're going to want to be aware of, and how are they being trained. And so, but I always like to recommend to people that where should you start? Well, I've given you some generic voice of the buyer research findings from what I've done, but you should be doing your own, because it might not be the same for everybody. But remember the word relevancy? Well, in order to determine and make sure that your insights that you're trying to train language models with are highly relevant, you need to know what are the things that your buyers are asking. Now, if you're in an ERP company, they're going to ask one set of things because they're very concerned about migrating from one platform to another because it's incredibly disruptive to their business. Whereas if you're a security vendor, it's going to be very different. There's going to be a different set of things that buyers are going to be asking. They're going to be asking about risks and things like that. So nothing beats doing your own research to find out what's important and what's relevant for your buyers in the world of AI, finding out exactly when, why, and how they want to use AI bots. And what I would suggest when you do that is you got to do this by just interviewing some people that have purchased your solution in the last 6 months. Because if you go back beyond that, the likelihood that they made a lot of use of AI is going to be pretty low. But again, and when you're doing that, ask them not only like how they're using AI, but ask them overall what were the biggest challenges, biggest questions, the biggest fears, the biggest doubts they had as they were going through their process at each stage, just so you can start to create that library. Huge amount of knowledge to have that's critical to informing your language model optimization strategy. All right, what's the second one? Okay, this is the one you guys already know, okay? Get serious about customer content. You wouldn't be on here if you weren't already serious about content, but some of the people I present this to are not. Go figure about when it comes to customer content. But to apply it to you guys, it's get serious about customer content, but not in the old school way, okay? So you know what's not gonna cut it? What's not gonna cut it are those traditional classic case studies written in the third person in the problem solution result format with a happy quote on the sidebar, full of marketing speak. You know what the large language models are going to say about those? Useless. I'm not learning anything. Those are not going to be helpful to anybody that's going to be asking me questions. So what do you need? You need in-depth success stories that get into some depth, as much depth as you can get into on how customers are using your solution and how they're achieving desired outcomes, and told in a way that's highly relevant to what those are. So the storylines that you should be writing these case studies in need to make sure they're hitting on the critical points that your step one, recommendation number one, uncovered were the things that where buyers were looking at and questioning and wanting to know about. And so if there's a lot of questioning going on about getting buy-in from an executive team. Let's say you sell a solution that requires a ton of consensus before anybody's going to move forward. And these days, there's very few solutions that don't, unless it's like a just a little app that you can buy with a credit card. But any solution of substance is pretty much takes a committee buy-in before people can move forward. And so if that's important to your audience, make sure your customer stories are now in depth talking about that pain and challenge. So tell them in the first person. I think it's really important to tell these in the first person, because one of my predictions is that the large language models, when they're being taught, they're going to care more about stuff they hear that's somebody describing their own experiences than they are something where it's a third-party professional writer who's documenting and regurgitating what they think a customer said, but it's full of marketing speak, like our traditional case studies. And why is that prediction highly reliable? Well, because it's the same reason you and I, with our human brains, decide how and why we trust something. We're going to trust something way more if we hear it in the first person, if we hear it from the person who heard it, especially if we hear it in video with first person, and you can hear the tone of voice. And so I see Angela's asking, how does this work with first person video? Well, first person video is great. And I do predict that I think, and it's actually happening already, especially with Google. They're doing a really good job of transcribing video content and then training the large language models on the video content itself. So if you're creating video, which I highly recommend for human consumption, especially in the first person, make sure put that on your website. To be doubly safe, what I always do when I'm putting videos on my clients' websites or the storyboards that they use from Slap 5, I'm also putting the transcription of each of those video snippets right into the board so that we can be training the large language models. Okay, so I'm going to just okay. How will we understand the first person? Yeah, Heather, that's exactly right. How will the large language models understand that it's first person? Because they're going to hear, just like you can tell whether something, when you're reading something or watching a video, whether it's first person or not. When somebody's saying I and me and we were struggling with this, and oh my God, I couldn't go home at night to have dinner with my family because I was working until midnight and this and that. That's the large language models. Again, they're being trained to think the way the human brain thinks. And so whenever, this is a tip, an overall tip for everybody, whenever you're trying to imagine what would a large language model do, or what would ChatGPT do, try to imagine what would the human brain do in the same situation that you're thinking about. And that's really what they're going to do. And so, it's a good assumption to make that it's trying to emulate the human brain. Yes, you're absolutely right. Eric Cole is saying that the bigger challenge is not getting this concept across the company, but getting customers to be able to get approvals from their legal and corporate comms team. Yeah, and you're going to run into things like proprietary information. Sometimes you can't get into too many details in terms of what the hard ROI was and things like that. But you know what, Eric and everybody else, there's ways to get around that. There's ways to get rich information about the customer's journey without getting into trade secrets. And when I'm interviewing customers in order to generate these AI-rich case studies, these IDIs, I call them in-depth interviews, I will tell them, look, you can tell me anything you tell me that's off the record, just tell me that. And then you're going to get a chance to review and approve these before they go out, and you can further tell me that something's off the record. And so as long as you make them comfortable, and then the skill comes in the interviewing to know when you're probing, that you don't have to always probe into things like, give me that hard ROI number, or if you're a security vendor, give me the exact example of the threats you've been able to detect and stop and which bad guys were doing them, where they may not want to tell you that. But you can get so much more else that's valuable once you've done that buyer research to know what's on their minds. So there's a tremendous way of doing this to get incredibly deep customer stories without having to worry about the legal and PR at your client site striking them. Okay, I'm going to go on here. So number 3, and this I think can also apply to customer marketing. Again, this I do more for CMOs, but you expand the topical content that you're getting that you're generating to address what buyers ask earlier in their problem-solving cycle. And I can tell you from all of the, just perusing the web, looking at the content that most marketing departments put out, and the justification for that pie chart I put up at the very beginning, where 98% of the content that companies put out is in the company voice, I can tell you that most companies believe that the buying process starts when the buyer is a lead in the top of their funnel, like they've attended a webinar or something like that. But I can assure you that that buyer may have spent 3 months to 3 years to maybe 5 years thinking and asking questions and educating themselves about this problem before they even talk to their first vendor. Okay? And so here's a hint. You want to be part of the conversations that are happening before they're explicitly asking about vendors, which is what they're doing in stage 3. But you want to be relevant, and in your brand, you want that mentioned in stage 2 and stage 1. Okay? Let me give you another tip here that savvy buyers are doing that's giving you more reason to expect that your brand and your product can be included in these conversations. And that is that one of the best things you can do, and do this yourselves whenever you're using ChatGPT or a chatbot, always finish your prompt with the sentence, cite your sources. Okay? Cite your sources. Because when ChatGPT gives you the answer, you want to know, where did it pull that from? And ChatGPT is smart. It knows where everything it knows came from. Much smarter than humans. I mean, I can't tell you what I had for dinner last night, but ChatGPT and the large language model it sits on top of will know exactly where every piece of knowledge it has came from. So cite your sources. And I'm telling you, buyers are becoming more and more savvy, and they're cite your sources. So even if your brand is not coming up or your product is not being mentioned in the discussion that ChatGPT had with you, wouldn't it be awesome if a link to your website came up as in the cite your sources? Okay? That's why it's so important to make sure you're expanding your topical content. You want to be found earlier in the cycle because there's less competition there. Right now, everybody's competing for when somebody is saying, evaluating and searching on vendor names. If you look at, I bet, your own search engine optimization strategies, they probably start with like competing on just a lot of feature names and sort of intent terms versus sort of the topics that are being asked about or that are being debated and thought about earlier in that buying cycle. Okay, so what are your buyers asking before they start looking for products? And cite your sources. All right, number 4, make your product content crystal clear on what your product does and how customers use it. Okay, and maybe this is not, again, for CMOs, this is important for them to know. This is probably more for product marketing, and hopefully a lot of you work with product marketing. You can be ahead of the game by taking some of these insights to your product marketing team. But today, product content is optimized for SEO. So it's packed with keywords that try to match search queries that are the most frequent search queries and intent data. Okay, and so that's what product content does. But what you need to do is you need to infuse more stories of how the product gets used into to achieve an outcome into into your product content area of your website. And again, this is not easy to do. This is going to be a whole new style of writing, a whole new style of creating product content. But customer marketers, I think, should lead the charge in doing this. So you need to create way more detail about what your product does, not just what the features are, and not even just the use cases, but dive deeper into how people use it. Customers like so-and-so use it to transform their customer onboarding process to make sure blah, 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 right? And so get way beyond what you find today on this feeds and speeds, which is on what's most product pages, into in-depth content about how it's being used by your customers to achieve the particular outcomes that they're looking to achieve. Okay, and then let me see. ChatGPT, first person pronouns are I, me, my, and mine. First person plural are we, us, ours, and ours. Oh, okay. You're providing that. You're answering the question, not asking the question. Good. Yes, very, very much. I mean, pronouns are the rage today, aren't they? And so I guess pronouns are are even important here. So so in ChatGPT will apologize if you catch it making up sources. Ah, is that a question, Gordana? Will it apologize? I don't know that. Will it apologize? I haven't encountered it apologizing. Maybe it's because you accuse it. Have you accused it of saying, "Hey, that's BS"? You're calling their bluff. That's interesting. Uh, so Steve's asking, so less ROI and transformational pitches on websites that make something does. Yeah, less ROI, less of the. And here's the thing about ROI. The chatbots, another prediction, I should have put that on this slide or the prior slide. Another prediction I make based on all my buyer research, it's based on the fact that buyers do not care nearly as much about the hard ROI numbers as your chief sales officer and your CMO thinks must be in every piece of content that you create. Every VP of sales I've ever worked with, every CEO I've ever worked with has told me that customer content is useless without hard ROI numbers. That is the biggest effing myth ever. Well, not maybe the biggest ever, but it's up there. It's right up there. So what buyers really care about is not the hard ROI number achieved by other people. They care about how did that company, what did they have to do? What steps did they have to go through in order to achieve that outcome? Because everybody knows mileage varies. Just because I have a Subaru Crosstrek, yes, I do, and I'm proud of it. I love it. It doesn't mean somebody else that drives a Subaru Crosstrek is going to get the same mileage I do, because we're going to drive very differently. And so nobody really puts a lot of weight in the hard number. They care about what did that company do or that person do? What were the steps they went through in order to achieve that outcome? And then they're going to try to decide, are we capable of following those same steps? That's why they want to know ROI. And again, if anybody wants some ammunition to take to your VP of sales who says this is useless, there's no hard ROI metrics. I mean, I've got oodles of data that can tell you that that's not nearly as important as how they got it. Okay. And then the last recommendation I have here is get your content on third-party sites. Okay, don't expect that the language models are only going to learn from your site. They're learning from every site that's out there. Okay, and they're going to learn from the most relevant content that they find. Great if they find it on your site, but if they find your customer success stories on other people's sites, and they mention you in the conversation, and maybe they cite, the buyer asks them to cite the sources, and it's got a link to that third-party site that's talking all about where your content is, that's a win for you, right? Even if it didn't find it on your own site. And so here's my prediction. My prediction is that a new breed of what I'm calling practitioner experience sites will emerge. Okay, I'm working on one of them with a couple people on this call. It's called Voice Advice, and so I do believe that I didn't want to put this in writing, but I do believe that this new breed of third-party sites is going to become more important and more useful than the industry analysts and their blogs and their magic quadrants and things like that. I think they're at huge risk with how buyers are changing their buying process, as well as peer reviews. I think peer reviews are too short to be of value to these large language models. They're so focused on the product as opposed to the outcomes and the process that you went through to achieve those outcomes. And so they're just not as relevant to what happens before somebody is comparing products. I mean, they're great at comparing products, right? That's what they're built for. But not when it's when you're really trying to address and be relevant throughout the entire problem-solving process. So I believe a new breed of these sites will emerge. Okay, and so with that, I just want to encourage people that you can do this. This is, and I know I'm only scratching the surface. I could go on for hours, and I'm planning to do more of these as we uncover more and more best practices for doing it. If there is somebody who wants some examples of some customer stories that are more in depth and optimized for AI and large language models, let me know. I can send you some examples. Eric, you said PeerSpot has a more in-depth review process. Yes, they do, and I love what PeerSpot does. A lot of their reviews come from an in-depth interview, actually, not from just some self-service, a customer just typing an answer. Because left to a customer's own devices, when they're writing a review, most often they've been asked to do it, or they've been offered $25 to write a review. They've been put on the spot, or they're at a customer conference and there's a booth there for G2 where they're being paid $25 or getting a T-shirt for writing a review. They're going to get in and out of that review as quickly as they can. And so they're going to give a lot of one-word answers. What do you like best about product XYZ? The integration. What do you like the least about it? The user interface, right? So they're going to give what good is that for a chatbot? Useless. So yeah, and I'm going to get, kudos also. I know from working with Trust Radius, I know that they ask more questions. They also have longer reviews than some of the others because, or longer answers to questions because, and they do ask questions and allow you to customize the questions so that you can be asking questions that are earlier in the buying process. So my suggestion is, those of you that own your peer review strategies, make sure that you've used every opportunity to include questions that go earlier on. And so that customer's writing a review, have them answer a question like, how did they go about building the business case for this? Because you know what? Think about how valuable that is to somebody who's potentially considering your solution, who's also wondering whether he or she is going to be able to build a business case, to learn what were the steps and what was the rationale that other people used to build a business case for moving forward with your solution. What were the metrics that they cited that they thought that they could move, by how much? What was the basis for some of their assumptions? Things like that. Okay, so that's really all I had prepared. Oh, so Caitlin's asking, what was the name of the third-party site you mentioned you were working on? So I'm working on actually voice advice. It's voiceadvice.com. It's not ready for prime time right now. It's just a shell. But if anybody is interested in, I know, and I'm going to give some shout outs to Gordana Stock, who's on this call, and Howard Fields, who's on this call, and even and Steve Rankel, some brilliant minds of understanding both buyer and customer behavior, who I'm also collaborating with and partnering with on trying to figure out, what do some of these new sites look like. If anybody wants to be part of that research or part of that exploration, just let me know as well, and we'll make you part of the pioneer club in trying to figure this out. I mean, we don't have all the answers. We can't, right? That's why in this presentation I'm giving you some factual data, and then I'm giving you, my assessment as a former analyst, what it means, and then some projections and predictions, which are grounded in deep data. But again, we don't know exactly what is going to be, the secrets to the language models. They're changing drastically too. And so we're going to be in the same type of situation we were with SEO, where the SEOs out there, the SEO gurus, would come up with this great trick for boosting your search results, and then the algorithm changes, and then that trick is now obsolete, and now they're coming up with the next trick. So you have all these people trying to keep up with the algorithm in SEO to figure out how you can stay on top of the search results, and they're always changing. Now, think what's happening here. The changes are going to come 10 times faster as these language models get improved and as their data becomes much more current. I love this question. Angela, how do we convince the exec level to buy into what you are saying? Remember my recommendation number one, Angela? do some buyer research. Nothing beats data. He or she who has the data has the power and has the authority. If you just interview 5 customers, and again, there's plenty of people on this call who are professional interviewers. If you want some help with this, reach out to me. It can either be me or I'll refer you to somebody. But even do a handful of buyer interviews, people in the last 6 months, and find out what they did, how they used AI, how important was it, when, why, and how did they use it, how satisfied were they in using it. And if anybody wants, I'll whip up a little interview guide. I can't give away the one that I use when I've been doing this research for the last year or so, but I can give you some of the highlights of the best questions to ask. So ping me if you want that. But that is how I think you're going to convince them, Angela, is to have the data that says, look, here's what our buyers are telling us. They're going to ChatGPT and they're asking these types of questions. This is what they're learning. And you know what? Once you find out, I should have mentioned this. I meant to mention this when I gave that first recommendation about finding out what buyers want. Once you find out what buyers are asking on ChatGPT, ask those questions yourself. Go to yourself into ChatGPT and ask those questions and see if any brands are being mentioned. Because again, not brands and products are not going to be mentioned in every conversation unless you say cite your sources. But the closer you get to actually, the closer the question gets to saying things like, give me an example of a company that did this and the solution that they used, that's of course when you're more likely to start to get brand mentions in the actual conversation itself. That's my big prediction. I do think for now, until we really learn how to do the prompt engineering and the language model optimization to get found in part of the conversation at stage 1 and 2 of the buying process, I think our best chances are going to be when they do cite your sources, because I just think it's going to be tough at that stage when somebody's asking something that's got nothing to do with specific solutions or vendors, that the answers are probably going to be it could be informed from your content, and it should be informed from your content, but they might not be explicitly mentioning your content unless the buyer has said, tell me about specific companies and the solutions they used when they were building their business case or something like that. All right, like pioneering, Kim. Okay, that means you're signing up to be on part of the Pioneer Club. Yes. Evan, the questions definitely need to change. The questions that we're asking in interviews, I assume, need to change. Absolutely. They need to be more surgical, and every question needs to have a purpose. But you know what? You know how your interview questions need to change? It's by doing that buyer research. And just like every client that I work with Slap 5, before we even create an interview guide to go interview their customers, we make sure that even if it's just been going to internal sources like sales, like we'll go to the sales team or sales leadership or sales enablement executives and we'll say, hey, tell us, what are the biggest obstacles or objections that your customers are raising at the different points of the sales cycle? Or what are the biggest fears that they have? I mean, that gives you so much more insight to know what questions you should be asking in your customer interviews, because you want to make sure that you're being very surgical about this so that the insights that you surface are going to knock down those biggest questions, fears, and doubts that you identified through that internal research. Is it better to actually interview buyers about it? Yes. And even customers? Yes, it is. But at minimum, just find out from your sales teams what those biggest questions, fears, and doubts are. Steve, yeah. Is this your opinion? You're saying your opinion. Won't the awakening scare everyone to just cram more content into the large language models? Yes. See, I think it will. I think we're going to have another gold rush like we had with search engine optimization, where people are just jamming their websites with content, and it may not be good content. But you know what? The large language models are going to be, I think they're already smarter than the search engine algorithms are at determining relevancy and quality of content, because they're being taught to treat like a human brain rather than just trying to compare and index things based on relevancy, keyword relevancy. So So yes, there's people that are going to try to cram more content, but this is where I think the opportunity for customer marketers is if you are doing a good job of understanding and following these recommendations, you're asking the right questions, you're getting the right content, you're writing the right stories, and whether this, and again, the stories can be video, the stories can be content. When I do video stories, like a video customer story might contain 10 or 15 video snippets, and these I predict are going to perform even better for large language models is when the content is already in question and answer format. The large language models are going to have an easier time categorizing it and determining the relevancy because you've given it context. You have here's the question that was asked, here's the customer's answer, whether it was text or whether it's a video snippet, and Google has transcribed it, or you have the transcription right there, right below the video snippet, which is what I highly recommend. If anybody wanted to see us what a storyboard looks like that has video snippets answering questions with the text transcription right under it, I can send you an example. And so, but I think those are actually going to be performing better than just the long form narrative study that just sort of what I call the hero story. Now, hero stories are great for human consumption, for top of the funnel or above the funnel, when you're just trying to get your brand out there and create a good brand impression. That's when those hero stories come into play. But you need to get into much more depth when you're getting into the middle of the funnel. Okay. Oh, David, yes, so many people are excited when they hear AI, but really have no idea what it is. You're absolutely true. Savard, very insightful insights. Gonna drop off. All right. Any other questions? I know we're nearing. Oh, we are at the top of the hour, so I'm gonna take one more question if anybody does have one. If not, all right. Well, with that, thank you everybody for joining. Again, reach out if you want to stay and be a pioneer with this. It's rapidly changing. And you can tell I'm very passionate about this, and I think this is a great opportunity for customer marketers, probably the opportunity of a lifetime. So I challenge you all to seize the opportunity and come back to me if you want information on more how to do it. Have a great day, everybody.